There has always been an unspoken bond between Superman and Batman. One born not out of similarity, but out of balance. The light and the shadow, the hope and the fear, the God and the man. But what if that bond shattered? What if the most unlikely betrayal came not from an alien invader, not from a magical sorcerer, not even from Lex Luthor, but from Batman himself? This is the story of how trust between two legends can be broken, and why betrayal by the Dark Knight might be the one thing Superman could never survive. Stay with me, because as this tale unfolds, you'll see how even the Man of Steel is vulnerable. Not just to Kryptonite, not just to magic, but to the sting of betrayal. It begins in the shadows of Gotham. Unlike Metropolis, Gotham thrives on paranoia. Every deal, every handshake, every smile hides a blade in the dark. Batman was born in this crucible. Suspicion was his shield, preparation his sword. But Superman, he was raised in the open skies, in the warmth of the sun, where trust and compassion shaped his very being. And yet, somehow these two worlds collided. Despite their differences, the Justice League united them. Time and again, Superman and Batman saved each other's lives. They fought gods, monsters, and even reality itself, always side by side. But in the back of Batman's mind, one truth festered. What if Superman turned? It wasn't paranoia without reason. Batman had seen worlds where Superman was no hero at all. Alternate realities where he became a tyrant, a warlord, a god who ruled Earth with an iron fist. He had seen the injustice world, where grief twisted Superman into a dictator. He had seen visions of the crime syndicate where Ultraman terrorized worlds. Batman could never ignore these warnings. And so, even as he called Clark his friend, his brother, he built plans. Contingencies, weapons hidden in the shadows. Whispers in his files labeled simply, in case of Superman. For Batman, betrayal was not a possibility, it was an inevitability. The question wasn't if. The question was when. Superman, of course, knew nothing of this. He trusted Bruce without hesitation. The Kryptonians saw in him the best of humanity, the reminder that even without powers, mortals could stand tall against gods. When Batman spoke, Superman listened. When Batman doubted, Superman reassured. To Clark, Bruce was the man who kept him grounded. But what happens when the man you trust most begins to act like he trusts you least? The first cracks were small. A cold word in a league meeting. A hesitation before sharing intel. A secret mission Batman carried out without telling Clark. Superman brushed it aside at first. Bruce was Bruce. He lived in shadows, worked in silence, and trusted no one. That's just who he was. But soon, whispers began to reach Clark's ears. Whispers that Batman was collecting pieces of Kryptonite, that he had built devices hidden in satellites, devices keyed to one target only. Superman. The truth? Batman had been preparing for years. A vault beneath the Batcave, filled with weapons, red sunlight emitters, and contingency plans. He told himself it was protection for Earth, for humanity, for the League. But deep down, was it something darker? A fear, a jealousy, or perhaps a truth Bruce never admitted to himself. That he could not trust a god, no matter how kind his smile, no matter how gentle his hand. The breaking point came not in battle against a villain, but in a simple mission. The League faced a cosmic threat, an alien machine draining life from cities. Superman was the spearhead of the assault, charging into the machine's heart. But when the core activated, Kryptonite radiation flared. Superman fell weakened. And Batman? He hesitated. Not because he couldn't save Clark, but because, for a split second, he wondered, what if this was the moment? What if Clark was compromised? Should I let it end here? That hesitation cost lives. It nearly cost Superman his own. And when Clark learned of it, when he realized Batman had designed the mission knowing Kryptonite was involved, the trust finally broke. Superman confronted Batman in the Watchtower. His voice shook not with rage, but with sorrow. You planned this, he said. You used my weakness against me. You didn't trust me to do what was right. Batman, ever cold, replied, I trusted you to save the world. But I don't trust that the world can survive if you ever lose control. The silence that followed was heavier than any battle they had ever fought. For Superman, it was more painful than any wound. Not because Kryptonite had burned him, but because the man he called brother had already betrayed him long before. This is where betrayal cuts deepest. Not in the act itself, but in the revelation that it was always coming. For Superman, betrayal by Batman wasn't about a weapon or a plan. It was about love, love that was never truly returned. He gave Bruce trust. Bruce gave him doubt. And now that unshakable bond was shattered. But this is only the beginning, because betrayal has consequences. And when Batman finally crosses the line, when preparation turns into action, Superman will have to decide. Can he forgive the unforgivable? Or will Batman's betrayal become the one battle even the Man of Steel cannot survive? The silence between Superman and Batman after that confrontation was deafening. The Justice League felt it. Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, even Martian Manhunter. Two titans of the team now divided. For a time, they kept their distance. Superman returned to Metropolis, throwing himself into saving lives, working harder than ever to prove he was trustworthy. Batman stayed in Gotham, drowning deeper into his preparations, his war plans, his obsession. But betrayal is not always one sharp cut. Sometimes it comes slowly, and when it strikes, it changes everything. It began with whispers of a new enemy. Not Lex Luthor, not Brainiac, not even Darkseid. But something darker, something designed to tear Superman apart. Batman's secret had slipped. His files, his contingency plans for every member of the League were stolen. Not by chance, not by luck, but because Batman had let them be vulnerable. To him, it was strategy. If his enemies held his plans, he could predict their moves. But in truth, it was arrogance. And it cost him dearly, because those files fell into the hands of one man, Luthor. Luthor now had a playbook. Every weakness, every countermeasure, every secret, and not just against Superman but against all of them. But who wrote those plans? Who put Kryptonite blades into the hands of their greatest enemy? Batman. And when Superman discovered the truth, the wound deepened. You gave him everything he needed to kill us, Clark said, his voice trembling with disbelief. I gave him nothing, Batman replied coldly. He took what was already prepared, but Superman saw through the lie. It wasn't theft. It wasn't chance. It was betrayal. The results were devastating. Luthor unleashed an army of machines powered by kryptonite radiation. They swarmed Metropolis, burning through Superman's strength, driving him to his knees. And when the League came to aid him, they, too, fell to weapons designed by Batman. Each trap, each weapon, each strategy, not Luthor's genius, but Batman's. For Superman, it was no longer paranoia, no longer suspicion. It was proof. The man he called brother had armed his worst enemy. When the dust settled, the League regrouped in the Watchtower. Half their forces wounded, the city scarred, and Superman, his cape torn, his hands shaking, not with weakness, but with something darker, with rage. He turned to Batman. His voice carried the weight of betrayal. You did this. You armed him. You nearly destroyed us all. Batman's answer was chilling. I armed the world against you. The room fell silent. Even Wonder Woman, who often defended Bruce's pragmatism, could not speak. Flash's usual humor died on his lips. The truth was bare. Batman had not made contingencies to protect his friends. He had made weapons to destroy them. And Superman realized something then. This wasn't just betrayal. It was war. That night, in Gotham, Batman stood alone on the rooftops. The city lights flickered below him. But his mind was elsewhere, on Superman. He told himself it was necessary, that the world needed him prepared, that trust was a luxury, and his duty was survival. But deep down, Bruce Wayne knew the truth. He had betrayed not just Superman. He had betrayed himself. The part of him that believed in friendship, in hope, in family, That part had died the moment he chose suspicion over loyalty. Superman, meanwhile, stood at the edge of the Fortress of Solitude, the cold winds of the Arctic whipping against his cape. He had faced gods, monsters, universes collapsing, but never had he felt pain like this. Because Kryptonite could weaken his body, but Batman's betrayal had broken his heart. He asked himself a question he never thought he would. Can I forgive him? Or must I stop him? It was then that a darker thought crept into Superman's mind. One that terrified him more than Kryptonite ever could. If Batman had armed Luthor once, what was stopping him from doing it again? What if Batman himself became the enemy? And so the stage was set. Two men, once brothers, now standing on opposite sides of a line drawn not by villains, but by themselves. Batman believed betrayal was preparation. Superman saw it as treason. And for the first time, the world whispered a terrifying thought. What if the Justice League itself broke apart? This was no longer about trust. It was about survival. Because betrayal is like poison. Once it enters the bond of brotherhood, it spreads. And for Superman, the question now burned brighter than ever. If Batman truly betrayed him, could he survive the fight that was coming next? Betrayal lingers. It doesn't fade quickly. And for Superman, betrayal from Batman felt like the shattering of a world he thought unbreakable. But betrayal demands a response. And Superman knew he could not stay silent. The League had gathered once more. This time not in the Watchtower, but in Metropolis. The city was still healing after Luthor's attack. An attack only made possible because Batman's contingency plans had fallen into enemy hands. Superman stood at the center of the meeting, his cape torn, his eyes heavy, his voice calm, but edged with steel. I cannot lead alongside a man who does not trust us, he said. We are a league. We are supposed to be more than weapons. Batman stood in silence, his cowl shadowing his face. The others shifted uneasily. No one wanted to choose sides. But they knew this wasn't just about two men. It was about the soul of the League itself. Later, away from the others, Superman sought Batman out. He found him on the rooftop of a Gotham skyscraper, perched like a gargoyle in the dark. You betrayed me, Superman said, his voice low. You betrayed all of us. Batman didn't flinch. I prepared for the day you fall. That's not betrayal. That's responsibility. Responsibility. Clark's voice rose. You handed our enemies the keys to destroy us. Batman's reply was cold. They would have found a way eventually. At least now I know what they'll use. Superman stared at him, his fists tightening. You don't get it, Bruce. You didn't just prepare for me. You prepared against me. You never believed in me. And in that moment, Superman realized the truth. It wasn't Luthor who had truly broken his heart. It was Batman. The confrontation did not end in fists. Not yet. But it ended with something far worse. Distance. For weeks, Superman worked alone. He stopped answering League calls. He retreated into himself, saving lives, yes, but no longer confiding in his friends. Because if Batman could betray him, who else might? And Batman, for all his resolve, felt the weight too. Every night he stared at the Batcomputer, scrolling through files on the League. He told himself it was strategy. But deep down he knew it was fear. Fear that he had destroyed the very trust that kept them united. But betrayal breeds escalation. Luthor, now armed with Batman's stolen knowledge, launched a second strike. This time not on Superman, but on Gotham itself. An army of Kryptonite machines swept across the city. And for the first time, Batman found himself unable to stop them alone. His strategies, his weapons, his contingency plans, all of it useless. The very tools he had designed to control Superman were now burning his city to the ground. And so, in the darkest moment, Batman called for help. Not from the League, not from Wonder Woman, not from Flash, but from Superman. When Clark arrived, Gotham was in flames. The two men stood side by side, their eyes meeting for the first time since the rooftop. You made this mess, Superman said, his voice sharp. Yes, Batman admitted. His voice cracked. But I can't fix it without you. For Batman, those words were harder than any battle. Because asking Superman for help meant admitting something he rarely admitted to anyone. That he was wrong. And Superman, despite his anger, despite his pain, still chose to fight. Not for Batman, not for trust, but for Gotham's people. Together they fought Luthor's machines. Together they saved the city. But when the battle was done, and the smoke cleared, Superman turned to Batman and asked the question that haunted him. Tell me, Bruce, if the world came down to me or you, would you save me? Or would you stop me? Batman looked at him, his silence heavier than any answer. And that silence was Superman's answer. For Clark, the betrayal wasn't just that Batman had planned against him. It was that Batman could never see him as a friend first, only as a potential enemy. And that was the wound that never healed. So, can Superman survive betrayal by Batman? Yes. His body can survive Kryptonite. His will can endure broken trust. But the scars left behind remain. Because betrayal doesn't just weaken muscles. It weakens the heart. And even the Man of Steel is not invulnerable to that. And perhaps that's the greatest irony of all. It's not Lex Luthor or Darkseid who cut Superman deepest. It's Batman. The one man he thought he could always count on. The one man who proved that even heroes can betray. And though Superman may rise again, a part of him will always wonder. Not about villains. Not about enemies. But about his friend. His brother. The man he once trusted above all else. Because if Batman could betray him once, could he do it again? And that is a question that may haunt Superman forever.